So the first thing I was, wanted to kind of prompt you with was like, what in your practice, like what kind of drives you between, between the figurative elements and going into full abstraction? I know you go a lot, like you'll start figurative and go abstraction, but is there some kind of like, the inspiration that drives you in that one way, or is it kind of just in the moment you kind of follow the practice?
Um, so a little bit of both. Like a little bit of a lot of the time it can get like spearheaded by reflecting back and looking at something that happened in the moment, and then the next piece will get kind of more direction and trying to pull it. So essentially, just like layering up paints, and then from there getting to some sort of point um, that was different from say a previous point of entry, and then usually reflect on that and try to find a space into it because that's some of most of the stuff I did with the graffiti when we were younger and was like all figurative like characters and stuff. So for me, it's a good starting point to find shapes, forms, and relations of things that are interesting to me that I can later pull
Right.
in other pieces down the road and stuff. And
Nice. And you're obviously like, you're very interested in narrative, and you used to write like, plays and stuff. Or
yeah,
you're
yeah,
definitely
totally.
very interested in narrative, so I can see how like, that could be a good starting ground. And then that's uh and do you use like, yeah, do you just kind of start and you'll find a composition? Like I'm curious for these new paintings that are much more restricted and a lot more negative space. Like do those have any figurative elements, or did that certain layers?
Those started with playing around with figurative compositions and trying to build things off of like using thirds and just different like compositional elements, having weight distributed in different things with figurative and then also like architectural elements, and then trying to play around with that to find pleasing things, which then led to oh, I can just start taking just the lines out of them and using more just motion with it and then building up off of those compositional elements where I would build try to build like vocal points in my paintings to focus on the figurative stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
So would you say there's a lot of like active discovery in each piece? Like
Yes, yeah, tons. I think each piece is very much it's always a learning thing for me, and I tend to start with series. So I tend to do a lot of starting in a style, try to learn as much as I can from the style, and then almost abandon the style to move forward into something else, and always taking elements from each process, whether it just be the way I was blending materials during that piece, or the veracity that I painted at. Lots of different elements.
Yeah, I think you've got like a knack for like, trying something out, like really pushing yourself in a different direction, and then kind of like, taking what you've learned, and then you seem to always go off in different directions. It's really exciting
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see you as a painter, because sometimes you'll do some just totally abstract stuff that it's
Oh, dude,
like
it's exciting for me.
totally mind blowing on my level, and then I'll see you do some amazing like illustrative, figurative work. So it's like, it's like seems like it's a totally different box, but knowing how you work, and it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
they are like in the regard of where they stand from a viewing standpoint, they're definitely and the narrative in the piece itself, they're definitely a lot contrasting in a way. But in the process of creating them, they share a lot of the same process and that. And,
Yeah, and I can see a lot of like you probably learn, like you were saying, you probably seems like you're learning a lot of specific like paint handling, skills, and your own style of doing that. Like, and through the illustrative stuff, I see a lot more clean and like, kind of maybe because you're working with like set forms, you're able to, there's like, I see that you've taken a lot of like, really skillful illustrative kind of style, and like work that into your abstracts as well. And that's one of the things I find really beautiful about a lot of your abstract paintings is like the clean crispness, and then you'll still have some totally raw stuff, but like you definitely learn to like incorporate the different stylistic sort of qualities.
Totally,
Yeah.
yeah. A lot of that, like that approach too comes with it's weird. So I get a lot of inspiration from like cartoons and that just that straight edge style, but then how raw their dialogue could be in some like the adult cartoons, you know. But then
Yeah.
you give this nice crisp image with like this kind of rawness, and it's just like yeah, it's an interesting thing, and like and then with graffiti too, that's one thing I always love about graffiti, like walking against like just going against walking next to a wall, it's covered layered in tags, and then you just have like this one like beautiful piece painted over top of it all, you know, or something. And it just like it's nice having that contrast of like this like somewhat more less controlled element with like a controlled element, and having that those contrast each other is like very find it very fascinating.
And I think that's what I find really interesting in a lot of your abstract paintings is where you've got so much wildness going on in the forms and the composition and the line work, and then often it's also very like cleanly put together. You know, the way you're handling paint and colors and stuff, and your muted colors, and yeah, it's I think it's working into some really interesting space with that.
Thank you.
I'm really
yeah.
excited to see the new paintings because from the pictures I saw, it looked like they were quite raw and had like just a much less amount of like clean and controlled filling in of spaces, but you've still got like there's a delicacy to how you're building these compositions and using color.
Totally, yeah. And the cool thing with those is it's turning that negative space, that background into the clean element of the painting, and then having almost this explosion of like chaos coming from the certain vantage points on the canvas, where you try to make it interesting in some way or another, and then have that crispness and that tightness be brought in by the rest of the negative space, and then
Yeah. Really like sets it off so that those raw like wild aggressive forms really pop.
yeah, it helps helps to contain them, but then also helps to push them out as well, you know, and like it gives them it's like a painting on a nice white background, you know. It gives it like a nice center to it all. And
Yeah, it's like some of the works that I've been doing where there's it's like much more restrained. It's kind of working within that same realm where it's just the background is like the clean part. It's just something to set off the forms basically, right? It's like
oh man,
the
totally.
cleanness around that kind of allows the messiness of the forms to live on their own, but also just that relation, the figure ground relation being like there's not much, it's basically, the background is like all encompassing and clean and tidy, and then the figure is just, it really pops.
Totally. And if I it just it allows so much movement for the mind to, just for the viewer there, they can just walk around that background, almost, and like see it from so many different angles then.
Mm-hmm. And I think the way that you're so intentionally playing with these compositional elements too, it seems like from the pictures that I've seen of those newer works, they seem like that it really shines through, right? You're not muddled up with a whole bunch of other stuff going on in background, and like kind of muddling that really intensely like ratioed composition and the tension of those kind of points of tension and how all these things are lining up.
Yeah. There's a lot of it too. It stems from like a lot of our conversations and stuff like that in the past. And one specific one, last time I was here with Emma, and we were walking down by the beach there, and we were staring. You were like, oh, let's take a moment to appreciate these ropes on logs. And a lot of the new works, a lot of it was natural development, but with like that in mind, refresh in my mind from like our last time I saw you, and like that was like thought about it a bit, contemplating. So a lot of those compositional elements kind of come from that too. It's trying to have that weight and like that, and like that pull, but then that release every now and then, and but then have it all weight on that nice something, saw like a background like that.
Yeah.
Saw the background.
Yeah, because it really seems like that push and pull, and yeah, you definitely see like these forms. They're yeah, it seems like I can see that now actually. That there seems like they're kind of tied together, mangled together, but they're not. It's like you kind of maybe you started with that in mind, but then you cleaned them up and like kind of let the points of tension and the interesting parts shine, and so they're very like connected, but they also feel like very intentional how you've left the space between them and allowed the space to breathe between those points of tension and
Totally.
the heavier parts.
Totally, and that was a big thing that I learned from doing lots of figurative stuff was the relation between geometric forms and very like straight edge things like buildings and city roads compared to the people that you throw in there to inhabit them. Is the people tend to have a lot more looseness to themselves in that landscape when everything else has to be a little bit more tighter, built off of some sort of perspective point. So it has to be a little more tighter, a little edgier, and there's just those sharp edges. So a lot of it, the lines themselves, like the physical lines I'm making, a lot of them tend to be the looser ones tend to be like just a line from an arm or a line from a leg, and then another one might be a perspective of like an edge of a building or something more sharp to contrast those lines. But yeah, that was something I learned during like doing lots of the figurative stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about too. That then in the abstraction, you've got these other sort of reference points where the forms, like I find in my own work, I come out with there's curves and lines and things that seem to suggest like certain human forms or certain natural forms, but I don't ever really consciously like address those or intend to put those in. It's just the natural shapes relating. But with you having all this figurative work and the landscapes and cityscapes and stuff, it's like gives you a point of reference to have something more concrete to kind of base the abstraction off of, right? That you
Totally.
kind of reference these other more the natural scene and how that would affect how sharp to make this intersection with that curved line or likewise.
Yeah, which is it's a huge I'm trying to build that limited compositions, and like that it helps like for like a point of entry of it. And it's not might not necessarily what comes across visually, but like it as an end result, but it helps to just get brush to canvas,
Yeah.